This video features the best quarterbacks of 1972. The 6 Pro Bowl quarterbacks will be compared to the highest rated fantasy football quarterbacks, and the results are amazing. Pro Bowl quarterback with the highest fantasy football rating is Joe Namath, who is rated as the 7th best fantasy football quarterback of 1972. Namath was the youngest of the Pro Bowl quarterbacks at age 29, and he made the Pro Bowl team primarily for leading the NFL with 19 touchdown passes and 2,816 passing yards. If you haven't already, please click the subscribe and like buttons and leave a comment at the end of the video as to who you think is the best quarterback in 1972. Doing so helps my videos to reach more football fans. Thank you. Norm Snead of the Giants is rated 8th best. His first year as a Giants quarterback was 1972, and he was a Pro Bowl quarterback on the basis of leading the NFL with a 60.3% completion percentage. Len Dawson was a distant second with 57.4%. Snead also finished 3rd in quarterback rating and turned the Giants into an 8-win, 6-loss team after finishing with 4 wins and 10 losses in 1971. Despite the dramatic team turnaround and excellent individual season, Snead didn't receive any NFL MVP votes. The Raiders' Daryle Lamonica had made the Pro Bowl 4 times before 1972, and he was a 2-time AFL Player of the Year award winner. So even though he was second in passing touchdowns with 18, his passing yardage was less than 2,000 yards, and I think he was named to the team primarily due to his past performance and accolades. Lamonica finished as the 10th best fantasy football quarterback. Billy Kilmer was a Pro Bowl quarterback? Yes, he was. 1972 was the only year for him, as he tied Joe Namath for the most touchdown passes in the NFL with 19. He only started 10 games because the first stringer, Sonny Jurgensen, snapped his Achilles tendon. Kilmer was known for having a 10-cent arm, but a priceless heart. Even though he was second in the NFL in passer rating, and he led the Redskins to the Super Bowl, he was only the 13th best fantasy football quarterback in 1972. John Hadle had been a Pro Bowl performer 4 times before 1972, and perhaps that's a reason as to why he was named to the squad again in 1972, despite having almost 2 times more interceptions than touchdown passes. In 1971, he led the NFL in passing attempts, passing completions, passing yardage, and passing touchdowns, so that appears to have been fresh in the minds of voters. He's ranked as the 14th best fantasy football quarterback in 1972. Fantasy football rankings are not congruent with the Pro Bowl quarterbacks just featured. That's because the voters place primary emphasis on passing effectiveness. Rushing effectiveness was not weighted much at all. Fantasy football rankings take into account both rushing and passing, with rushing touchdowns being weighted more heavily than passing touchdowns. The top 5 fantasy football quarterbacks for 1972 were taken from ProFootballReference.com, and the top 4 are ages 23 through 26. Not surprisingly, they're all running quarterbacks. It's interesting that the 5 Pro Bowl quarterbacks were ages 29 through 33, and none of them were remotely considered to be a running quarterback. It's true what they say, you can't run forever. The 5th highest rated fantasy football quarterback is Fran Tarkenton, who is known as the Scrambler. By 1972, however, he had relegated to scrambling in the pocket in order to buy time to hit the open receiver. Tarkenton was the master of the short passing game. Eventually, his short passes would tighten the defensive coverages, and then he'd strike with the long ball to receivers like John Gilliam. Harry Bradshaw may be a big surprise at number 4 because his passing wasn't the greatest in just his third NFL season, but he made up for his lack of passing statistics with 346 rushing yards and 7 rushing touchdowns. Big, strong, and athletic, he wasn't shy on goal line sneaks and quarterback keepers. When he couldn't locate an open receiver, he just took off. His 346 rushing yards was a single-season high watermark for Bradshaw, and he wouldn't come within 120 yards of that total again. And it's understandable when 245-pound wrecking ball Willie Lanier pounds you like a nail. Archie Manning is number 3, and he was an offensive machine in 1972 as he passed for the second most yards and chipped in with 351 rushing yards despite taking a physical beating. In each of his first 2 NFL years, 1971 and 1972, he led the league in getting sacked, 83 times total. In his rookie year, he was sacked an incredible 18.4% of pass plays. His 448 pass attempts in 1972 led the NFL by a large margin. He had 19% more pass attempts than Fran Tarkenton, the second-place finisher. His 351 rushing yards were a career best, and he wouldn't come within 50 yards of that mark again. Like Bradshaw, he learned that too much running leads to too many bumps and bruises. Bears' Bobby Douglas is ranked number 2 in 1972. He nearly had as many rushing touchdowns as passing touchdowns. He had an absolute cannon for an arm, but he sorely lacked touch. While he did connect on some fine deep throws from time to time, his completion percentage of 37.9% was woeful. But fantasy football doesn't care about completion percentages. It does care about yards. Douglas only averaged 89 passing yards per game. So how did he get to be number 2? By rushing for 968 yards, an NFL record for quarterbacks at the time. While he led the NFL with a 6.9 yards per carry, he would not come within 440 yards of his record-breaking rushing season again. The top 5 fantasy football quarterbacks averaged 473 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, while the 5 Pro Bowl quarterbacks only averaged 32 rushing yards and combined to only rush for 1 touchdown. Calm fell over Tiger Stadium in 1972. Greg Landry had been a Pro Bowl quarterback and finished 9th in the 1971 MVP vote, and Lions fans were expecting good things from him in 1972. He didn't disappoint them, as he was the best of both worlds, a fine passer and an excellent runner. His 18 passing touchdowns were second best, and his 9 rushing touchdowns were the best in the NFL. In 1971, he broke the single-season rushing yardage record for quarterbacks with 530, and in 1972, he almost equaled it by rushing for 524 yards. His 27 total touchdowns was 7 more than the number 2 quarterback Archie Manning. Landry was the clear-cut number 1 fantasy football quarterback in 1972.